All right, guys, welcome to the show. I got an amazing one for you today. So later on, we will get to Donald Trump was reportedly super ticked off inside a courtroom. It's a $10 million defamation hearing. We're going to go through, and he's already, by the way, he's already found liable. So he's already guilty, effectively. It's just a matter of how much is he going to have to pay. He was very pissed off in the courtroom. We'll talk about that. We'll go through what's happening on the ground in there. We'll also get to Nikki Haley now repeatedly humiliating herself. And Democratic politicians are coping and seething over Donald Trump having a blowout win in Iowa. In fact, they're trying to pretend like it wasn't a blowout win at all. It's actually really bad news for Trump that he had a literal historic win in Iowa. So we'll talk about all that and more. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively in the algorithm. It doesn't cost you anything, and it takes 2 seconds. And I love you, and I appreciate you if you indeed do click that button. So without any further ado, let's dive into it here. Let's start with updates in the Middle East. And not shocking to say this, but it ain't pretty, man. It's really, really ugly. So first of all, the Jerusalem Post is reporting that Netanyahu has said to communities that live along the Gaza border on the Israel side that the war is going to continue until 2025. 2025. Now, by the way, let's be clear. This isn't a war. It's not a war. It's a slaughter. That's what it is. You have bottle rockets versus a super advanced military backed by the world's sole superpower. It's not a war. Let's stop calling it a war. It's definitely not a war. Okay, so he wants it to go to 2025. Why? Well, we all know Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, all these top Israeli officials have made clear they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza and they want to resettle Gaza. So that's one of the reasons why it would go on for really, really long. The other reason is Netanyahu is trying to save his ass politically. He knows he's deeply unpopular. Basically, the second the war is over, so is his political career. You know, the walls are closing in on him for his corruption scandal and for his Supreme Court scandal where he tried to go full authoritarian and nullify their power. People don't agree with how much he failed when it comes to security on October 7th. So that's why he would do this. This is horrible. And this is something where the U.S., if they were even somewhat reasonable or moral or ethical, would check his ass and say, the hell it's not going to 2025. We're going to cut off all of your money, all of your weapons, sanction you through the UN. Like, there's a million things you could do, but of course the U.S. is not going to do it because there are no real red lines for Israel. All right, let's continue here. So, according to Axios, and we talked about this the other day, the U.S. had this plan to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, even in the midst of the Gaza genocide. And then Biden was going to do a victory tour, bragging about getting peace in the Middle East. Okay, this is literally just the Donald Trump, Jared Kushner plan of pretend Palestinians don't exist, try to work around them, and just let's all play pretend. Let's make pretend that Palestinians don't exist and everybody's all happy and hunky-dory here. So that plan leaked, and then the White House was thoroughly embarrassed by it because everybody was making fun of their plan, and they sort of had to back off of it. So now we learn, according to Sullivan, U.S. post-war strategy still links a Saudi and Israel peace deal, so normalization between those two. But now there's a twist. There will be a two-state solution that's a part of this, and it will involve basically Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, as the head of Gaza. Okay, well, when you read the specifics, of course, this is not actually a two-state solution by any stretch of the imagination. They're basically little Bantustans, semi-autonomous enclaves. The Palestinians do not have an actual state. They don't have full sovereignty or independence or control of their own resources or even control of their own airspace or even the ability to defend themselves and have their own security. In this scenario, basically, Israel is still in charge, but MBS is the figurehead of Gaza. So Kenneth Roth here comes out and says, why is the Biden administration banking on the Saudi crown prince, who could care less about Palestinians, to press Israel to accept a two-state solution? Does the administration forget its own leverage? $3.8 billion in annual military aid and massive arms sale. And Adam Johnson chimes in and says, because the goal is permanent subjugation and second-class status for Palestinians and creating a venal, native informant government for the West Bank and Gaza is the order of the day. And for some bizarre racist PR reason, acting like MBS is the Pope of the Arabs is key to this. He continues, and it's not a deal Israel wants, mostly because they know it's a fake photo op thing and they don't even want a Vichy government in Gaza. They simply want Gaza wiped off the map. The Pope of the Arab stuff is a State Department compromise. What do these Abraham Accord peace deals between Israel and Gulf dictatorships have to do with a two-state solution? The answer is they end all pretense of establishing a meaningful Palestinian state. Faking like Gulf dictatorships and the U.S. and Israel were working towards some mysterious far-off two-state solution was an essential part of justifying apartheid and the siege and prison-like status of Gaza. The Abraham Accords and their silly photo ops remove all pretense. Any media, including the MBS as Pope of the Arabs Theater, any media indulging the MBS as Pope of the Arabs Theater needs to explain why a recent poll showed Saudi Arabia has a 5% approval rating in Gaza. If Saudi approval is supposed to confer Arab legitimacy, how does this square with the fact that Palestinians absolutely loathe MBS? Now, beyond that, MBS has some practical reasons why he can't do this anyway, because like 98% of his own population says you should cut off all ties with Israel. So he's going to turn around and do this grand fake posturing thing where he saves the day and does a two-state solution and is now the king of Gaza or something. It makes no sense. This is all nonsense. This is all nonsense. All right. Now let's talk about this. You have the Biden illegal war on Yemen's Houthis. We talked about that time and time again. And last time we talked, they had already done like 2 or 3 different strikes on the Houthis. In Yemen proper, by the way. It wasn't just like, on the seas. Well, now we get this. U.S. carries out new airstrike against Houthis in Yemen. So this is either the 3rd or 4th. According to ABC News here, they say the 3rd time the U.S. has hit Houthi sites in Red Sea attacks. So in other words, everybody who said, hey man, this is just like a one-time thing, they're just trying to check the Houthis and put them in their place, that's not correct. And now we know that as a matter of fact. This is going to continue. In fact, Biden basically said this is going to continue until they stop their, quote, outrageous behavior. Well, as they pointed out, there's an easy way to make them stop. Have Israel stop bombing Gaza. Put pressure on Israel to make them stop. You could do that, but no. Instead, they'd rather keep bombing them. So this is an illegal attack. By the way, it's not just me saying that. There's a number of Democrats and Republicans who are coming out and saying this is not in accordance with the War Powers Act. This is because it would need to be for imminent defense of the country in order to attack them without congressional approval. It's clearly not that, but the U.S. is continuing. And by the way, the Houthis are strengthening their resolve as this happens. So they're saying, first of all, you're not hitting any operationally necessary spots, like all of our weapons are still safe, all of our drones are still safe. And furthermore, now we're just going to spread our mission to also block UK and US ships. And by the way, the shipping companies themselves have said, well, now this is an active war zone, so none of us are going to go through this route. The whole point of Biden doing this, he said, was we need to open up global trade. Well, you just made it worse. Okay, let's continue. A Greek vessel was hit by a missile fired by Houthi rebels. So in other words, what Biden is doing is not working. Yemen's Houthi movement has hit another ship in the Red Sea off Yemen. The Iranian-backed rebel group says the Greek-owned bulk carrier Zagrafia was sailing from Vietnam to Israel when it was struck on Tuesday. It is said to have suffered only minor damage. So, ship going to Israel, they knew it was going to Israel, and they said, this is what we're blocking, and we're going to continue to do that. So Biden's mission has failed yet again. Now we get to, honestly, even bigger stuff. This is even bigger right here. So Iran launched missile strikes in northern Iraq and Syria. And then we're going to get to this in a second, but also attacks in Pakistan, which Pakistan is not taking lightly. So Iran claims to destroy an Israeli spy base. Let's go through this a little bit. Iran's Revolutionary Guard on Monday launched ballistic missiles at what it said was a spy base for Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, in northern Iraq, and at anti-Iran terror groups in Syria in the latest escalation of hostilities that further risk spiraling into a wider regional war. The strikes were condemned by the U.S. as reckless and imprecise. By the way, it happened near a U.S. base. People initially thought Iran was attacking a U.S. base, but they weren't. Iranian forces said the midnight missile strike in Iraq destroyed one of the main espionage headquarters of Israel in Erbil, capital of the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region, in response to what they said were Israeli attacks that killed Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders and members of the Iranian Resistance Front. So in other words, they're saying this is actually retribution for an attack that you guys recently did. That, and we're also going after basically Israeli CIA, who are doing espionage against us. So this is really the first time that Iran, like the government of Iran, has fired back in any way, shape, or form since the beginning of the slaughter of Gaza since they were attacked. Remember that story? And initially, everybody thought this has to be Israel, right? And then for a while, people thought, no, actually, there's some evidence it might be ISIS. And then people were like, well, maybe it's literally Israel and some Sunni extremists working together to go after Iran. Well, Iran thinks they have intelligence that verifies who did it, and that's why they did these bombing campaigns. But there's more. Oh, by the way, this guy died in the bombing campaign. Businessman Peshra Aga Dezei, one of the richest people in Iraq, killed in Iranian missile attack on Erbil. 4 of his family members were also killed. So in other words, Iran now killed innocent civilians as well in Iraq. So just as we said from the beginning, violence begets violence. Things spiral out of control. Things escalate. All it takes is a little tit for tat, and then eventually, boom, you have a war throughout the entire Middle East. Okay. Iran attacks alleged militant bases in Pakistan. Islamabad says unprovoked strikes kill 2 children. So they strike in Iraq, in like a autonomous Kurdistan region in Iraq. They strike in Syria, and they also strike in Pakistan. Iran launched attacks Tuesday in Pakistan targeting what it described as bases for the militant group Jaish al-Adl, potentially further raising tensions in a Middle East already roiled by Israel's war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Pakistan said the strikes killed 2 children and wounded 3 others in an assault it described as an unprovoked violation of its airspace. Confusion followed the announcement from Iran as state media reports on it soon disappeared. However, the attack inside of nuclear-armed Pakistan by Iran threatens the relations between the 2 countries, which have long eyed each other with suspicion while maintaining diplomatic relations. The attack also follows Iranian strikes on Iraq and Syria less than a day earlier, as Tehran lashes out following a dual suicide bombing this month claimed by the Sunni militant group Islamic State that killed over 90 people. Okay, so remember, as they say here, Pakistan is a nuclear-armed country. And what just happened after this attack, every sort of Iranian ambassador or diplomat who's in the country was kicked out. So is Pakistan going to now do something in retaliation for this? I don't know. The other thing is now Israel is apparently fearful that, this was all a warning to Israel proper as well. That like, hey man, they bombed Iraq, they bombed Syria, they bombed Pakistan. Are we next? Are we next? This is not good. None of this is good, man. None of this is good. And this points out that Israel fears that these bombings were basically warnings. And one of the reasons they think it's a warning is the type of missile they used is a long-range missile, which could reach Tel Aviv and could reach other parts of Israel. And so they think this is a little bit of a warning to them. All right, so now let's discuss the numbers coming out of Gaza. I got some updates from Gaza for you guys here. So from Euromed Monitor, this came out on the 14th of January, so we don't have fully updated numbers yet. But there's 31,497 Palestinians killed. Of them, 28,951 are civilians. Now, by the way, for those of you who look at this and say, well, hold on, the UN numbers are lower and some others have it at a lower number, this number includes people who are presumed dead under the rubble and they've been there for an extended period of time. So in other words, I think these are way more accurate than numbers you're getting from the UN or anywhere else for that matter. 12,345 of the dead are children. I really want you to stop and reflect on that. And I also want you to ask this question. How many more are going to die? As we all just sit and casually watch, as the U.S. continues to arm and fund Israel as they do this. How many more are going to die? There's 61,079 injured. We're at 113 journalists who are killed. Of the 2.3 million people in Gaza, 1.95 million are displaced. There's 69,700 completely destroyed homes. Those people have nowhere to go back to. They have nowhere to go back to. And this is why I think it's very obvious and straightforward to point out. I think they're ethnically cleansing Gaza and trying to resettle it. For sure, the northern part, but they're also probably working on the southern as well. You have 187,300 partially destroyed homes. Think about that number. 187,300. Does that sound like a hunt for Hamas for you? To you? By the way, you know how many Hamas members there are? Out of 2.3 million in Gaza, there's 30,000. There's 2.3 million people in Gaza. 30,000 of them are Hamas. 187,300 destroyed homes. Does that sound like a hunt for Hamas? No, I didn't think so. All right. So you guys can see the rest of the numbers here. There's a report from Euromed Monitor that came out about the lack of access to clean drinking water and how it's a death sentence for the people of Gaza. The catastrophic lack of clean drinking water sources in Gaza City and the northern areas of the Gaza Strip has left Palestinians there facing a horrifying tragedy akin to a death sentence, Euromed Human Rights Monitor said in a statement issued Monday, citing the war crime as further evidence of the genocide Israel has been carrying out against the Strip's civilian population since October 7th. Distress is engulfing Gaza City and its northern regions in alarming ways, a result of Israel's cutting off of the water supply in the Gaza Strip, systematic and intentional Israeli bombing of water sources and wells, and a lack of fuel required to run water conversion and distribution facilities. The human rights organization warned that the lack of drinking water in the Strip has become a matter of life and death. It noted that residents are currently forced to drink unclean well water, which is contributing to the spread of transmitted and infectious diseases, especially amid the power outage and overall water supply shortage. Prior to Israel's 100-day-long genocide, the Gaza Strip, one of the world's most densely populated areas, was already experiencing a crippling crisis in clean drinking water supplies. More than 90% of the population of 2.3 million people were living in a declining economic environment with the barest necessities. Gaza's main reservoirs, Al-Balad and Al-Ramal, were completely destroyed last weekend during an Israeli bulldozing operation in the area. By the way, why is this not being reported far and wide? Why is it only in this human rights agency's report on the issue? This seems like a big deal. They just completely destroyed their main reservoirs. The Euromed Monitor team confirmed Al-Balad Reservoir, which houses a water well, a warehouse for waterline maintenance equipment, and administrative offices for the city's water department, and Al-Ramal Reservoir, which includes the sanitation department's offices and a warehouse for sewage network maintenance equipment, have both been bulldozed during the Israeli ground incursion. Wow. Now, to give some specific numbers, according to the Palestinian Water Authority, the ongoing Israeli military attacks have destroyed the water infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, including at least 65% of the water wells in Gaza City and the northern areas of the Strip. I'm going to say it again. When you're taking out the water supply for 2.3 million people, does that sound like a hunt for Hamas to you? All right, you get this amazing story from Haaretz. Israel's army drafted and armed thousands of settlers. This is in the West Bank now. Accounts of their violence are piling up. Regional defense battalions have grown fivefold since the war in Gaza started, and there are more and more accounts of settlers serving in them, assaulting and threatening Palestinians. So in other words, what happened was, after October 7th, the IDF was unleashing all holy hell on Gaza. We all were witnessing it. But you had the more extreme, pro-illegal settler factions of the government, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, all those types, the ones who are the most powerful within the government, by the way, if we're being honest, they decided, oh, well, in order to protect our people, let's hand out weapons to the settlers in the West Bank. So they took the weapons, we covered it, we showed you the videos and the pictures of them handing out the weapons. Now, shock, shock, they're forming militias and they're doing aggressive and offensive action. What a surprise. What a surprise. We saw this coming from a mile away. Now, by the way, again, I know this point is being beat to death, but it has to be made. What does this have to do with Hamas? There's no hunt for Hamas here. Hamas isn't even in the West Bank. And these are illegal West Bank settlers who are armed to the teeth, and now they're going after Palestinians. All right, we got this news. The IDF is closing in on Al-Nasser Hospital. This is one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. And there's now a number of reports that the IDF is going to take this one offline too. Ryan Grimm says, since furiously protesting responsibility for one strike on one hospital early in the assault, the IDF has systematically assaulted the healthcare infrastructure of the entire Gaza Strip. Al-Nasser is packed. Oh, man. Jesus. All right, let's continue. Israel has responded to its clear loss to Hamas on the digital battlefield by making its first ever purchase of a technological system capable of conducting mass online influence campaigns, according to numerous sources with knowledge of the matter. Israel bought mass online influence system to counter anti-Semitism. Okay. Look, there's nothing they could do to override the depravity and the barbaric nature of IDF TikTok. Whatever you think you're going to do to make your case with this goofy stuff that they're laying out here is not going to hold a candle to what the IDF are doing over there on TikTok, exposing to the world what's really going on here. So we get this. Israeli Education Ministry withdraws funding of Jewish event over Arab-Israeli host. A woman who represents a mixed marriage cannot represent Jewish culture, said the ministry. The only democracy in the Middle East. It's not apartheid. Israel's not racist. It's so funny because the top Israeli officials are screaming, it is apartheid, and we are racist. And then you have idiots in the West who are like, bro, that's not even true. Only democracy in the Middle East. All right, so this is a crazy story. Bernie Sanders tried to force a vote on a piece of legislation that basically said, all right, the U.S. government needs to do a report on Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. If they either don't do the report, or if the report comes back negative for Israel, proving that they're, taking away the human rights of Palestinians, then in that scenario, weapons got to be cut off. So again, let's repeat. If they either don't submit the report or create the report, or they submit it and we learn what indeed is happening, is restricting the rights of Palestinians, the weapons get cut off. So Bernie forced a vote on this, and guess what happened? Literally only 11 people, 11 senators, voted with Bernie. Guys, all he was asking for was a report, and then if the report proves Israel is committing crimes, we cut off the weapons. They're saying, we don't even want to do a report. So these are the only people who voted the right way. LaFonza Butler, Martin Heinrich, Mazi Hirono, Ben Ray Luan, Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Rand Paul, Bernie Sanders, Chris Van Hollen, Elizabeth Warren, and Peter Welch. Everybody else said, I don't care what Israel does. I want to keep arming them no matter what. And then you look at this and go, how the hell could they vote this way? Well, it's very simple. AIPAC pays a lot of money in campaign contributions to politicians in both parties. So remember when Ilhan Omar said it's all about the Benjamins? She was right. She was talking about AIPAC. She was talking about the Israel lobby. She was talking about money in politics. And guess what? They spend a lot of money in politics. So does the Saudi lobby, which is why Saudi Arabia gets a lot of what they want. So spare me the crocodile tears. This is insane, and this is an example of our government being bought. And then finally, this is in the Times of Israel. Israel forbids doctors from speaking to UN group investigating October 7th atrocities. Let me repeat that. Israel forbids doctors from speaking to UN group investigating October 7th atrocities. Why would they do that? What are they trying to hide? I'll leave that up to you to think through. And we'll end with this one. So here's Claire Daly, a member of the European Parliament. She's an independent and a socialist. And as you're about to see here, she's very, very Irish. And she gave a speech where she is going to not hold back on Joe Biden and say what she thinks about him and him backing Israel's slaughter.
Despite the catastrophic death toll it has inflicted, Israel is losing on the ground and in the court of public opinion. There's no way that this ends that doesn't leave Israel a pariah state with occupation and apartheid on borrowed time, and they know it. So they're doing everything they can. Desperate acts of aggression to provoke a wider conflict with Lebanon, with Iran, with anybody, to draw in the US, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. And as Yemen shows, Butcher Biden is reporting for duty. With Europe's proud genocide by his side, they are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror. Without them, it would already be over. So take note, Butcher Biden. The ancestors of the Ireland that you claim to be from disown you. Keep our country out of your mouth. And as for von der Leyen and genocidal Germany, with your words and deeds supporting Israel in the ICJ, not in our name. The people of Europe stand with Palestine and with South Africa.
Butcher Biden, the people of Ireland disown you. Damn. I think that says it all. Look, final point I'll make here is everybody better buckle up, because now with Iran firing back, going after, Mossad in Iraq, going after others in Syria, bombing a terror group in Pakistan, all because they say they were attacked by these groups. you know, this is how wars not just start. Like, we're sort of in the middle of the escalatory process. Let's just say that. How do we know Pakistan's not going to fire back? How do we know Israel's not going to bomb somewhere in Iran now because Mossad was hit? You know, how do we know various Sunni Shia militia groups on the ground in Iraq and Syria don't get more involved? There's already been over 130 attacks on U.S. bases by various groups that are, you know, proxies for Iran. This is not good. This is not good. And guys, there was an off-ramp for a very, very long time, every step of the way. And Israel refused to take it, and the U.S. refused to take it, and the U.S. refused to force Israel to take it. And so now we're all watching with horror in our eyes about just how far this goes.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.